What's up, horror fans? Danny here from the Lasercast, and if it's a Saturday afternoon, that means we're here to talk about what happened on Friday night, and that is Joe Bob's last drive-in on Shudder. And last night was a double feature, part 1 and 2 of the Maniac cop franchise. And he had 2 special guests, one for each film. Bruce Campbell, the epic cult favorite star of the Evil Dead franchise, Burn Notice, Xena, you name it. The guy has been a cult icon for 30 to 40 years. I have been very privileged to have met and actually interviewed Bruce Campbell a few different times, a couple different horror conventions, and I got to meet him at a couple Comic-Cons doing press when I was writing for geeksofdoom.com. So I have a long storied history with Bruce Campbell and the Evil Dead movies. Those are some of my all-time favorites. Maniac Cop came out in 1988, and the sequel, Maniac Cop 2, came out in 1990. Both were directed by William Lustig, who was Joe Bob's second guest during Maniac Cop 2. And William Lustig became infamous amongst horror and exploitation cinema in 1980 with the film Maniac. Not Maniac Cop, just Maniac, starring Joe Spinell in one of the great horror performances you'll ever see. That film was already covered on The Last Drive-In way back, I think in season 1 or 2. I mean, this is season 3. But Lustig is a favorite of Joe Bob's. And not only that, but speaking of favorites, not only was Bruce Campbell and Bill Lustig together for this, but this Maniac Cop, the original, features Darcy's favorite, all-time favorite, the great Tom Atkins, who is the top credited actor, although he's kind of only the protagonist for half of the first movie. Very strange. It's one of the only films, horror or whatever, that completely shifts protagonists in the middle of the movie. You'd think the movie is where Tom Atkins is the good guy chasing down the Maniac cop, Matt Cordell, and then about 50 minutes into the movie, he goes flying from a window at the police station, crashing into a car below, dead, and suddenly it just zips over to Bruce Campbell's character, who is a framed cop, and he now becomes the lead protagonist in the story. So, very interesting how that works. And then, part 2, it gets even crazier, because Bruce Campbell and the main female character, played by Lorraine Landon, they're both killed off in the first half of that movie. So it's a very interesting series. And these are some fun movies. Now, I'm not going to lie, I missed the first 45 minutes of The Last Drive-In last night. My family has been going through the ringer. As many of you know, I posted a video about it. My dad passed unexpectedly less than 2 weeks ago. And then yesterday, we found out that my grandmother passed away. Now, with my grandmother, it sucks, but she was almost 90 years old, and at least you could wrap your head around that. But my family has just been it's been a rough 2 weeks, to say the least. So I was, with my mother, trying to help her out. Missed the first 45 minutes of The Last Drive-In, but I did turn it on right in time to see Bruce Campbell from his home in Oregon joining Joe Bob. Joe Bob said it was the first time in about 25 years that he had joined, that he was interviewing Bruce, which, by my terrible mathematics, puts this back in the mid to late 90s, where he was probably a guest on Monster Vision. But you could just tell, having met Bruce Campbell several times, both as a fan and as a member of like the press corps who is, conducting roundtable interviews at Comic-Con, he's just one of the most engaging personalities. He's one of those people who anything he says comes out with this kind of level of sarcastic humor to it. He's the type of person who he can insult you to your face and you just feel kind of happy that you got insulted. You'd call all your friends and you'd be like, you're never going to believe this. Bruce Campbell just called me an ass. And that's just his personality. And Joe Bob is very similar. So their interviews were really, really fun. And they talked about the gamut of things. Bruce talked a little bit about The Evil Dead and how he recommends to everyone in the movie industry to become a producer. Because once you become a producer, you now have input into the creative process. And very interestingly, Bruce Campbell, who, of course, Bob Tappert and Sam Raimi were friends who got together to make The Evil Dead, so he never had to audition for his role in the Evil Dead movies. So as a producer, he said it allowed him to never have to audition for movies, which is something he doesn't like to do anyway. It was really interesting that they talked about, and I'm glad they did, because it's kind of hard to ignore a lot of the parallels that Maniac Cop has to a lot of the things that have been going on in current events today. I mean, here we are. I'm not going to get political here. This is a horror movie show, but we are just a few months, maybe not even a month shy of the Derek Chauvin verdict in Minnesota in the George Floyd case. And if there's one thing you know about Larry Cohen, who is the screenwriter of the Maniac Cop films, it's that he did not shy away from controversial and political issues, even in the most crazy exploitation movies. Like, if you go back and watch The Stuff, or even Q the Winged Serpent, you're going to get just really topical political dialogue, which you don't expect from these kind of like B-level horror films. The Stuff is about like yogurt that kills people. And here it's Maniac Cop, and there's scenes where you're looking at the TV and people are talking about how, the cops are out on the street, they're trigger happy, they're trying to kill us all, we got to be afraid of the police. And Joe Bob, to his credit, does not shy away from that, and they have a really interesting conversation about that. They also do a really hilarious comparison of the two actors in this film who are known as the Chin. You have Bruce Campbell, of course, famous for his chin. I have his autobiographies in my collection. One of them is called If Chins Could Kill. But he is actually overmatched by the Maniac Cop himself, actor Robert Zadar. And he had some type of medical condition that made his chin was just absolutely insane in the best possible way. And they got into another kind of like morbid but funny conversation about Robert Zadar apparently passed away, and when he passed, he was at a horror convention in Florida, and he didn't feel great. I think he was having heart palpitations, and he ended up passing away from those complications there. And Joe Bob and Bruce were talking about how they do so many horror conventions, and Joe Bob said that would be the worst possible way to die, in the middle of a Q&A. And Bruce Campbell, to his credit, said no, he thinks that would be the best way to go. He said, I wrote down, his quote was like, I want to go in the middle of a Q&A where somebody asks him a question and he goes, let me think about that. And then he just kind of puts his head down. And he said it would be great because everybody would be looking, eagerly waiting for his answer, thinking that he was doing a bit, and then he just fell asleep in the middle of the question. So that made me smile a little bit. Based on what I've been going through personally, that made me smile a little bit. I got to shout out Darcy. And And I gotta ask Joe Bob on here and to everyone at Shudder, for Darcy's sake, we need to get Tom Atkins on The Last Drive-In. For her, back on the Valentine's Day episode, she married a Tom Atkins face masked puppet during the Midsummer Festival when the Love Witch was on, and here she cosplayed as Tom Atkins' character, Detective McCrae in Maniac Cop. She also cosplayed at the end of Maniac Cop 2 as the Maniac Cop himself with some really cool facial scarring. I do want to shout out the Silver Bolo winner after the first film was Cadaver Cast, a podcast where apparently a dad and his young son review movies together. And hey, if you guys love that stuff, Charlotte and I do horror reviews here all the time on the Lasercast. So, you know, that just shooting it out there. Her and I are going to do a Saw franchise ranking soon. She's seen all 9 Saw movies. Just saying. And Maniac Cop 2, like I said, most of the survivors of Part 1 are killed off instantly. There's the addition of some new, really fun characters, especially Leo Rossi's character, this like sadistic serial killer, and the makeup on Cordell, Robert Zadar, is much more, he looks a lot more zombified in Part 2 than he does in Part 1. Part 1, he looks like, you know, where he's got like some prosthetic makeup, but he's human underneath. Part 2, he's gone like full zombie makeup, which is kind of cool. I could not stay up for the entire Part 2. I did rewatch Maniac Cop 2 this morning, and it is super enjoyable. It's a rare case where a sequel is just as good, maybe even better than the first film. And I thought it was a lot of fun to have Maniac Cops 1 and 2 on there. I know that usually The Last Drive-In likes to switch it up, and they only like to do franchises like that on special occasions, where obviously they've done like a Halloween marathon for Halloween, and they've done the Phantasm. They've run through the Phantasm franchise at one point, but I think that was for like a special Christmas episode maybe. So either way, another great night. I really needed the catharsis of enjoying The Last Drive-In last night for the time that I got to watch it. And like I said, Charlotte and I are going to be doing a Saw franchise ranking at some point later today. Speaking of later today, Pete and I are going to be doing a Spiral review from the Book of Saw. We both were in the theater separately in different states, seeing it on the same day a couple days ago. So we're going to be together later. Also, just updated on Shudder. If you're looking at my shirt, Psycho Goreman from director Steven Kostanski. Go check this movie out. It is one of the most fun movies. I would love to see Joe Bob and Darcy tackle this film next week or sometime soon on The Last Drive-In. I think it is perfect drive-in material. And if you want to go onto our channel right now, Pete and I interviewed director Steven Kostanski not too long ago, and I did a full review of the Blu-ray, which I have up in my collection back there. It's a tremendous film. Charlotte loved it. It's one of those kind of gateway horror films. Yeah, there's a lot of blood and there's a lot of gore, but it's all kind of done very tongue-in-cheek, very practical effects. So if you're looking for a good movie to introduce to like your 10, 11-year-old horror fan in your family, Psycho Goreman. So yeah, that's it for me on The Last Drive-In recap, and we will see you soon on the Lasercast. And again, I'm just going to throw it out there for Darcy. Let's get Tom Atkins on there, and a Halloween 3 Night of the Creeps double feature. think that'd be a good idea. See you soon on the Lacercast.